Okay, back again. It's another Dungeon Master Guide for Dungeons and Dragons, whether it's be Dungeons and Dragons 5e or some other version of the game. It really doesn't matter, or any other system. This has been requested. So you'll find that with this particular video, I'm probably going to take quite a bit of time. I would expect it to be quite long. And I do apologise if that winds up being more than what people wanted. You might need to watch this in pieces. Okay, so you will find the start time down in the description for those of you who want to skip past everything. Now, normally what I do is I present everything first and then I open it up for questions. What I'm not going to do is do that. What it's going to be is sort of like a slightly different arrangement. I'm going to give you just a little bit of information to start with. And then once I've given you that little bit of information, I'm going to open it up and you'll be able to tell that's when I'm ready to start talking to people because you'll see my face. I'm probably going to give maybe less than 5 minutes of lead in before I open it up and let you guys talk about stuff. I'm also going to very quickly just talk about all the different campaign starters that I have. So if you're wondering how it's all going to be laid out, that's essentially what I'm going to do. Okay, so let's get started and then we'll go from there. It's going to be a long run. This is going to be a lot of hard work, I can see right now. Okay, let's start. Hi, welcome to HowtoDandD. My name is Fred Wheeler and today I want to talk about Dungeons and Dragons. And honestly, it doesn't matter what game you are playing, whether it's the basic Dungeons and Dragons game from the very inception of Dungeons and Dragons, or you're playing Dungeons and Dragons 5e, or you're playing some other system. It really honestly doesn't matter. This has been requested. A lot of people have wanted some dungeon mastering guides around starting your campaign. And obviously that's because they don't want to start their campaign the same way all the time, or they want to shake things up a bit. So what I thought I would do is just show you 3 images, just to begin with, and I want you to decide which out of those 3 images is what you find the most appealing. And once you've done that, you can make comments in the live chat box to tell me which one you like the most. Now the first one I'm going to show you is the Tavern. This is essentially where the players' characters all meet for the very first time in a tavern, get drunk together and basically decide to go off and kill monsters and take their treasure or do whatever quest that the Dungeon Master has come up with, or maybe an adventure hook of some kind that they have created and the Dungeon Master decides to fill in the gaps. Or the second image where your party have already sort of got to know each other, they've already got their adventure hook and they're travelling a road towards whatever goal it is they have to achieve. And this is sort of trying to get rid of all of the awkwardness of your campaign and get sort of straight into the travel side and the adventure itself. Now it might not necessarily be travelling from one point to another, but it doesn't matter. But you get the point. And then the third option, which is your party of adventurers or characters have known each other for some time and they have already had adventures and explorations. They've already completed a quest or a goal. In this case, this particular party have already defeated a small dragon. So which one out of those 3 appeals to you as a dungeon master? Now I am going to tell you what I prefer. I prefer the third one, where the party know each other really well and they have already been doing things together. It makes life a lot easier for me as a dungeon master. I don't have to worry about trying to get my players to sort of buy into whatever I'm going to do next, because hopefully the agreement was that they would actually do that anyway. Okay, so that's where my head is in terms of what I want to present to you. I'm going to give you a whole bunch of different ideas. Now I thought about this really hard. What would I do in terms of sort of talking about campaign lead-ins and adventure hooks and starting your campaign? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to really quickly tell you 20 different ideas. Now these have been taken from my own brain, from other people's brains, from YouTube videos, from books, from the internet. I'm going to give you all 20 right now. These are the things I'm going to discuss today. And then you can decide if it's worth hanging around. Okay, so the first one is tavern meeting. So meeting in the tavern, which I consider to be, I don't like it. So the tavern meeting, prisoners, so your characters start off as prisoners of some kind. Maybe they start off as slaves, or maybe you start your campaign in an auction for something. It could be anything really. Maybe it's a party or a gathering, a grand ball, or maybe they're gathering up together to perform some sort of heist. So it's your story is going to be revolving around a heist of some kind. Maybe your characters are witnesses to an important event that is going to change the very fabric or nature of the world, or maybe on a smaller scale, or they are witnesses to possibly a murder of some kind that needs to be solved, or something like that. Hired by a patron, either in their own home or in somebody else's home or in a secret location, and they have to perform a task for a price, or maybe it's a favor. They're doing this as a favor. Soldiers for a kingdom under threat of some kind. Survivors of a destroyed town who are seeking sort of revenge for the destruction of their family members in the town that they used to be part of. A call to action in a dream, sending them on a quest. The player's characters are part of an organization of some kind, maybe a guild or a company. Characters are shipwrecked on an island or on a different planet or a plane of existence. PCs are recently raised from the dead. So they start off dead, and this is a product of some sort of magical effect, and they have to either perform some sort of task to have their souls rest in some way, or maybe to get their bodies back or something like that. The characters are fighting side by side as you start off in a gigantic battle for survival of some kind. Maybe it's their survival, maybe it's somebody else's survival. These warriors answer a plea from villagers who have basically been raided by some sort of bandits or monsters or creatures. Maybe they are escorts or guards for a wagon train or a caravan moving people and goods from one point to another. Maybe they have to find an ancient artifact before an evil group of evildoers can use it to dominate the world, or exert some sort of horrible darkness across the world in some way. Maybe they have to reforge a broken magical weapon, or even maybe destroy a magical weapon. If they're reforging a magical weapon, maybe that's to slay an invincible or terrible monster, or maybe it's to destroy a magical weapon so they can stop some sort of great evil. Maybe they have to, maybe they have to reforge a broken weapon so that they can, did I say that? I've already said that one. CSI unit, like a private investigation team who have to solve mysterious cases or solve a series of strange events. Maybe the crew of a pirate ship. You start them out sailing the seas, plundering rich merchants, or just causing trouble for some kingdom of some kind, or somebody else, it doesn't matter. Maybe they start off as circus performers who have run away. So instead of running away to the circus, they run away from the circus and go to make their fortunes. So these are all things I am going to discuss. I'm going to break them down into pieces so that it's a bit more just, there's a little bit of fleshing out. I'm going to give you some examples so you sort of know how to build it in. So for those of you who wanted the short version, that's the short version. I've given you all 20 ideas I am going to talk about today. So if this is the time you decide, Fred, I've had enough, thank you very much, I'm off, you can do that. Otherwise, I'm going to pull up my face and we're going to talk about the ins and outs of running a campaign so that you can sort of make really good, educated decisions. There's lots of really clever people in the live chat who will help, don't you worry. So here we go. Hello, how's it going? I'm just going to make sure I position myself sort of roughly in the middle and then transition over to a screen so you can see my face. Okay, hi everybody. So This has been requested for a long time. I am going to try to work from my notes as best I can. I also have a whole lot of examples sitting beside me. I know you probably don't understand quite what that means, but essentially there's a huge amount of examples that I pulled up. I spent hours and hours just trawling through stuff. Hi everybody, how's it going? Okay, so let's start off. One of the biggest hassles with starting a campaign and trying to make everything work is the reality that you've got to get a whole bunch of people to coordinate themselves, right? Sorry, I just need to move myself over a bit. So you've got to get a whole bunch of people to coordinate themselves, to actually cooperate and sort of link themselves into your adventure. And how do you do that? This is not supposed to be a session 0 discussion, but I'm going to talk about the session 0, okay? And the reason I want to talk about it is it's going to make your adventure so much easier to run. It's not about making it better, but making it easier for you, because there's a couple of things that happen when you run a session 0. It gives everybody an idea of what sort of adventure you're going to run. And maybe you provide them with options, maybe you don't, maybe you say, look, this is what I want to run, are you interested? And those people who are not interested can say, hopefully they're being honest, I'm not interested, I don't want to be a part of that, see you later. And off you go. That's fine. But it also means that the players can build characters, and you should be asking them to do that, to actually get them involved in integrating their characters into the story you are going to provide them with. Now, you've got to give them some meat. You've got to give them some kernel of information so they know what sort of character to build. If you don't do that, don't expect your players to actually build a character that's going to work in your campaigns. You've got to give them some meat, some sort of kernel, some sort of seed. That's what the adventure hook is all about. Give them the adventure hook first, and then let them build those characters. It is really solely up to the Dungeon Master to provide information to the players about what sort of character is going to work in the Dungeons and Dragons adventure that's going to be run. But it is up to the players to make sure they make characters that are not Chuck Norris, that are not Van Damme or Arnold Schwarzenegger or anything like that. They need to make a character that will work in your campaign. So, Dungeon Master responsible for providing players with information about their campaign and what they want to run, and players responsible for making a character that will work with that adventure. That is my view. You can disagree with everything that I say here right now. That's fine, but honestly, if you want things to work well and you don't want a whole lot of conflict, these are the sorts of things that need to happen. Now, this video is not supposed to be about a session 0. It is supposed to be about campaign starters, but it always starts with discussion with adults, teenagers, children, whoever is playing, about what is going to be taking place in your campaign. Now, this is what I would like to do, because I know there's a lot of people in this room and it might get fuller, for all I know, as we work through all of these ideas and I talk about the ins and the pros and the cons of each one, and sort of the ideas you can build on. I want you to use hashtag question. If you have a question for me, hashtag question in the live chat. That'll make it a lot easier for me to actually pick it out. If you have some really good advice that I have missed, then I want you to go hashtag advice and then write whatever your advice is on what I'm talking about. I do not want to go back to a topic I've already discussed. So if you jump in late, somebody jumps in late and you see that I have ignored their comment, it's because I'm going back to something else that I've already discussed, and there are 20 different starters I've talked about. How am I supposed to do that in anything under like an hour, hour and a half? There's a lot of material to cover, okay? So hashtag advice if you want to give advice, and hashtag question if you have a question. Alright, let's start off with the tavern meeting. Meeting in the tavern. By far, for me, the worst start for any campaign. And it's a cliche, it's a trope, it's been used many times. I don't really like it. I feel it's the weakest start for any campaign starting in a tavern. Now it could be an inn, it could be a tavern, it doesn't really matter. If they're sitting around and they've never known, the characters don't know each other, that's really a lot of hard work. Why do that to yourself as a dungeon master? Get them to build characters that are linked in. Now, here's the thing with meeting in a tavern. I have no problem with starting in a tavern, provided a couple of things happen. First off, if you are dealing with experienced people who have played Dungeons and Dragons before, and they are all friends and have known each other for a long time, and they know each other's personality and ins and outs, and they are good at linking in with you as a dungeon master, then starting off with characters that have never known each other in a tavern might work. But if you start off with people at your table who have never played the game, or they are not friends and don't really know each other, and they have to try to build in that trust and that link with these characters, it's probably not going to work. It is bound to be a disaster. Now, I have no problem with the tavern being used as a meeting point to discuss or lead into any of the other adventure hooks I have discussed. If it's all it's going to be done, all you're going to do is use it as a meeting point and nothing else, but that is not the focus, okay, then it's probably going to be fine. What I think works best for me is turning the tavern, if you're going to use a tavern, into part of the adventure hook itself, where it is the location where something happens, where the players' characters have to do something. Burn that tavern down. A fire starts. A fight breaks out behind closed doors in the back of the tavern. A fire starts, which means now the players' characters, now they should all know each other. I would prefer if they did. They have to now work together to try and put out the fire, try and save people from the fire, maybe engage in a battle with the people who started the fire. These are all conflicts. These are all adventure juice and meat. So that can work really well. What about blowing it up? I say blow up the tavern. Okay, boom, it's gone. Okay, they didn't even get into the tavern. It's going to be a hard night for them. No drinking, no mead, no ale, no wine, nothing. Okay, so that could be your lead-in, and some adventures have used that. I remember only one part of, I think it was it Lethal Weapon 3, the movie Lethal Weapon 3, where they start off with the entire building exploding. And I think that is a fantastic way to bring in the tavern. Okay, have you ever thought of a story, a piece of fiction, a movie that you liked that started in a tavern? I can't think of one. That's it. I can't think of a single one, which is why I really despise it. Okay, so here is the next thing. That's number one. And I want to talk about prisoners. Now, there's problems about starting off your players' characters as prisoners. And the problem is that it is what is used in just about every single video game under the sun. Can you think of, okay, somebody's just pointed out that Desperado started off in a tavern. And certainly, yes it did. It did start in a tavern. But that was for a single character, and let's get real. They blew that thing up. There's shotgun shells going all over the place. Essentially, it's the burn down the tavern or blow it up. That's essentially what was going on. It was just a complete mess. Okay, so Brandon's got some advice here. Thank you for doing the hashtag. I am paying attention. Brandon, what do you got here? Advice: have the party start out in a party home instead. It shows that it's a familiar location, good, and creates a singular identity. Have an NPC send their quest in a parcel to them and allow them to RP through that. Yep, I suppose you could do that. I'm I'm not going to say it's bad advice. I would say it's still going to be dependent on having a group of people at your table who are familiar with Dungeons and Dragons and probably friends. With people who are strangers, players who are strangers, it's going to be much harder. But certainly reasonable advice if you're dealing with experienced people who are friends and already know each other as players. Okay? Like the Heroes HQ. Fair enough. Okay, so let's go on to prisoners. Prisoners in every single video game under the sun. It is included in Out of the Abyss. I played the first part of Out of the Abyss. What do you notice about playing Out of the Abyss? For those of you who don't know, you are being held prisoner, which means there is security. There are doors to get past, there are guards, there are security measures, and it's all designed to make sure you cannot escape. It is actually a very difficult location to get away from. In fact, that adventure has built into it, if the player's characters can't figure out how to escape, which is incredibly hard to do, the dungeon master then has to come in and create this event that will allow them to escape. If the players can't do it, you've got to make something up. Create an opportunity. And the opportunity needs to be good enough that they're guaranteed of escape. Because what happens if you start your players' characters off and they are prisoners and they fail to escape? They tried to escape, they tried to pick the lock, they tried to knock out the guards, they couldn't get past all the security, and they get captured again. Or they get killed. If they get killed, like, you know, are you going to bring another character in? Are you going to just have them knocked out and unconscious? Now, you've already tried to escape as prisoners, you've failed, and now the second time you try to escape, what happens? They increase security, more guards, more security measures. They make sure your manacles and the chains around your legs are heavier and harder to break and destroy. You don't have access to magic items, weapons and armor that you would normally have. You've got nothing to work with. It's actually a really, really horrible situation to be in. If you're going to start with prisoners, your group is prisoners, they've already escaped. Something happened, they have already escaped, and start there. Don't start in the prison. That's my advice to you. It's not fun. I never found it fun. I actually found it, I tried really hard with Out of the Abyss, and I had run a couple of adventures, I believe 2, where I tried to use sort of a prison location. And what came across to me was that it's not satisfying to me, and it was definitely not satisfying to my players. They did not like it. I don't understand why so many RPG video games insist on using the prison as an opportunity. It's so frustrating for a player. So understand that. Frustrating as hell. Okay, next. I want to talk about a couple of examples too, because I'm a big fan of movies, for those of you who don't know. So, The Great Escape. Now, if anybody's watched The Great Escape, which is an old movie, it essentially goes through the process of the characters in this story repeatedly trying to escape, and eventually one of them does, and the rest either perish and die, or if they don't perish and die, they are recaptured and stuck. So this is a good example of why a prison as a start for your campaign isn't a great idea. Another story, which is called The Mysterious Island by Jules Verne. Now, Jules Verne has done some great stories. Now, this is about 4 prisoners who escape in a balloon, so essentially it's already tied in, and they crash land during a storm on a mysterious island, which is covered in all sorts of horrible threats and creatures that they need to sort of deal with. I think this is actually a really good idea. This is a little bit like the combination of a shipwreck and being prisoners, but the good thing about this is they've already foreshadowed. The story does not revolve around them trying to figure out how to escape. They get to the balloon, they get away. And that is a great way to actually use the prison idea. Okay, so there is a question by the Cart of Videos. This isn't a D&D question, but how and or where would someone start a Call of Cthulhu RPG campaign? You can start your Call of Cthulhu campaign pretty much anywhere, honestly. I think a mystery is probably a good point. And I'm going to talk about mysteries and sort of, you know, investigation and stuff in a second. So we'll get to that. I'm building towards that. There's a lot of material to cover. Okay, next one. This one is much like The Prisoner, and this is a situation where the player's characters are slaves. Now, they might be starting off their campaign as part of an auction where they get sold off to somebody. They might be slaves who have broken free and already escaped. They might be slaves who are prisoner. I don't advise that. I think if you're going to go with the slaves, have them already, they were slaves, they have escaped, they're on the run. I think that's the best way to deal with that. You can also use the concept of the auction, where you start your adventure where there's an auction for a dead person, their estate's on auction, or maybe there's an auction for an important artifact or item, and maybe they are security at that auction. I don't want to go too much into that because I didn't really feel that that was a very exciting lead into any kind of adventure, but you could start off with an auction. A slave auction is one where the slaves, for whatever reason, manage to escape. I feel like that's the best way. So what are some good elements and bad elements to this? Much like The Prisoner, when you are the slave, you are essentially now an outlaw. So you're on the run, you have the pressure of people chasing you. This can create conflict. It means that the sorts of things your players' characters can do in your adventure are limited, because they can't just, they've got to change their identity, they've got to be careful who they talk to, they've got to be careful where they go, all of which is complicated. And I would make sure the players' characters, their characters are one thing, but to make sure those players know what they're getting themselves into. Make them understand, look, you're playing a campaign where you're essentially an outlaw. Whether that's for good or for bad, or whether it's just or unjust is beside the point. You're playing essentially outlaws and you're on the run, whether that be the prisoner or the slave. So there is some complications to that. I like the idea of the slave, one, because it reminds me of a story I watched many years ago, and it's one of my favourites. Yet again, I'm going to use a movie, and that is Captain Blood. Captain Blood is essentially a doctor who winds up in slavery. This is all just backstory as far as I'm concerned. The real action is when we get to the group of individuals that he has befriended who decide to escape, and they leave the plantation and they escape and they capture a ship and they wind up as pirates on the high seas. Fantastic way to run your campaign as a lead-in. I think this works really, really well. Captain Blood. Slaves and then pirates. Why not? As I said, remember, you are essentially setting them up to be outlaws. Okay, so there was a hashtag here. I think I covered the question one. Will, how's it going, Will? Hashtag Fred, glad to see you again. I am trying to figure out how to take the Lost Mine of Phandelver module and turn it into a longer running campaign. Have any thoughts? Yes, I have 2 videos, as it happens, Will, called What's the Next Adventure After Lost Mine of Phandelver. You will find it in the playlist for Lost Mine of Phandelver DM Guide, or Dungeon Master Guide. So I've already talked about that particular topic. I've provided you with a whole lot of ideas that I had that I thought were good, that are from third-party publishers. I have told you how I approached the Lost Mine of Phandelver, and I have also provided you with all of the options I can with most of the Wizards of the Coast pre-published adventures and how to tie them in if you wanted to try and do that. So hopefully that will solve your problem. You can go and check out that video some other time. Hang around, there's still more stuff to be talked about. Okay, alright, now let's talk about the next one. And the next one is the gathering or the party. Now, it doesn't really matter how you lay this out. Essentially, there's a gathering of people, a party of some kind. I like the grand ball concept. When I think of grand ball, I think Cinderella, I think mask. masquerade masks. I think Anastasia is a really good example of using the party location as an adventure hook, where essentially you have a gathering of people, whether it be nobles or they're not nobles, or a festival of some kind. But in Anastasia, it all starts off with this grand ball, this birthday party for the princess. And what shows up is some sort of horrible, nasty sorcerer who curses her, curses the family, and a whole lot of bad things befall them. This is an opportunity for your characters to try and stop this individual from making that curse come true. So I think Anastasia is a really good example of how to bring your party together and make things interesting. And that is just the grand ball. And it's a huge opportunity to utilize roleplay. Rather than start your campaign off with a battle or a meeting, there's going to be a vast number of NPCs for them to communicate with, but the main focus is something's going to happen at the gathering, the festival or the grand ball, that is going to push everything forward. So that is the grand ball. Another one that has been sort of pickling through my mind for some time, and I was trying really hard to find things that would relate to stuff you guys are familiar with. What I thought was really interesting. Now, for those of you who've just started to jump in and are wondering why I'm not commenting, if you don't put hashtag advice or hashtag question, I probably won't respond. If you put hashtag Fred, then I'll check it out, okay? Otherwise, I'm just going to keep going. Let's talk about the heist. Now, where you start your heist doesn't matter. But there are many stories and adventures you can have with a heist. And we've got Waterdeep Dragon Heist as a good example of that, where the whole campaign revolves around a heist. Whether the players are involved in the heist or they're trying to foil somebody else's heist is beside the point. It's all still going to work quite nicely. I think this still sets you up with your players' characters being villains, possibly. And if they are trying to stop the heist, they probably won't be the villains. But there's a chance that they are going to wind up being outlaws. Make sure your players know that their characters are going to have a whole lot of hassles. They need to be stealthy, they need to be careful, they need to use disguise, they need to make sure they use spells that will help them. All of that sort of stuff. Okay? Now, what are some really good examples of a heist story? Well, a heist story, as it happens, we have a whole string of them. And I know some of you are going to gag and start saying, Fred, are you serious? But let's get real. The Fast and the Furious series are just a series of heist movies. Whether the group are actually doing the heist themselves or stopping somebody else's heist is beside the point. These are all groups of individuals who come together in some way. There's usually a leader or a mastermind. So one of your group members might be the mastermind, and essentially they are going to perform a heist of some kind. This is with cars. You don't need to use cars. You can use dragons. You can use a gnome-mobile. You can use horses, camels, elephants. Who cares? You can use some sort of fantasy creature. Maybe you're going to use griffins. Anything like that. So it doesn't need to be cars. Just because I pulled out Fast and the Furious is beside the point. Another good example for those of you who don't like Fast and the Furious, which came out a few years back, it was redone from the original, and that is The Italian Job. I know this is another car sort of movie or story where you think, well, Fred, are you only going to talk about The Italian Job and the Fast and the Furious? Well, no, but these are really good examples of heist, where everybody has to work together, come up with a really good plan to be successful. Now, maybe the heist is going to be a short campaign, or maybe it's only the beginning of the campaign. This is going to just feed you in. We are talking about campaign starters, where they get together for a particular purpose. Why not a heist? For those of you who have watched a few of their movies, Ocean's 11. Now, I've got the older version rather than newer version, but Ocean's 11 is essentially a group of gamblers, fraudists, outlaws, thugs, basically people who are thieves, and criminals who get together and steal from somebody's casino. So that is an opportunity as a campaign starter to build in your campaign. What happens after they are either they fail the heist or they succeed at the heist is another story, but this will lead you into something more. So I feel like the heist is a really good lead-in. Yet again, you've got to be careful because you are setting your players up. Their characters are going to be essentially outlaws unless they are stopping the heist. If they are actually involved in performing the heist, it makes it a little bit more complicated. Okay, hang on, I need a drink of water. Okay, James, I am working my way through campaign starters. Remember, you need to use hashtag advice or hashtag question if you want me to respond in the live chat. There's way too many people in here for me to be able to respond and give this kind of information. Okay, let's keep going. Next on my list here is witnessing an important event or a major event of some kind, or possibly some sort of murder has taken place. So they have witnessed an event which will drive the story forward. That is your adventure hook. That is your campaign starter. And I'm going to start off with two stories that I think are a good example of that. Now there's all sorts of things you can use. I've decided to pick a disaster movie. Now the reason I've picked a disaster movie is the consequences of that particular story are huge. So deep impact. A meteorite is going to strike the planet or the world and destroy it, but it's going to be followed. You know, the thing that leads up to it is a change of weather, or a change of seasons, or you start noticing things falling from the sky. Meteorites are, you know, striking towns and wiping them out. And this leads to people looking up into the skies and finding out there's something terrible coming towards them. So this is a good example of a lead-in to something more important, and the idea is to save the planet and the world. So deep impact, Armageddon, another good example where an important event might be taking place. Maybe a volcano starts to belch smoke, which could potentially wipe out the city or community where the player's characters live. So this is an important event. Or maybe they are witness to a horrible, grotesque murder, which they, you know, they stay hidden for, and they may or may not know who actually conducted it. It doesn't matter. If we want to go sort of more fantasy, and any of these ideas can be used as fantasy. You don't have to think of them as just being modern day adventure hooks. A really sort of an old movie came out many years ago, done by Disney, which was Dragon Slayer. Now Dragon Slayer, essentially this starts off with the important event being a lottery for the young women who have to go into this lottery, and they are selected, and then whoever winds up being selected from the lottery is eaten by a dragon. And if they don't do this, the dragon will burn them down, burn the village down, and kill everybody. So this is the major event that you start with. The idea is that they see that this is taking place in the town, and to stop it, they are going to have to face off or find some way of defeating the dragon. Now the dragon is an incredibly difficult situation. Maybe they have to find a sorcerer or a great warrior. Maybe they have to go and find a weapon. Maybe they have to forge a weapon. This is what takes place in this story. They go looking for a wizard, a mighty wizard, to help them battle the dragon. A weapon is forged. Many ideas are floating around with this particular movie. So I highly recommend checking it out. And as I said, the major event that starts the whole thing off is a maiden being eaten by a dragon, burnt alive and eaten by a dragon. So, and maybe they are part of seeing that. Now, what is the problem with doing something like this? The issue with presenting them with such a huge threat that they have to stop is they might be foolish and try and tackle a dragon and just wade in there and fight it, rather than using their brain and realizing they actually have to build up to it. And so you could wind up with your level 1 group, if you start them at level 1, trying to go straight into the dragon lair and getting chopped. And that's the end of your campaign. So I would suggest to you as a Dungeon Master, make it clear that fighting the dragon straight off is not a good idea, and that it's probably a smart idea to go and get help, or get better resources, or train up, or seek something that will help change the balance of power. So there's your big problem with using something like the dragon and the dragon lair. Okay, I need another drink of water. As I said, make sure you use hashtag question, hashtag advice. Otherwise, I'm going to just keep pushing on through here. Okay, so the next adventure hook or campaign starter is the player's characters are hired by a patron or a person, an individual, an organisation, it doesn't matter. Maybe it's in their home or some other location for a price or a favour. Now this is quite commonly used in Dungeons and Dragons. It is, I feel like if you are paying the characters to do something, that the strength of the story might not be quite as strong as if it was because they're doing it, it's a favour to a friend. I think is a much stronger lead-in than I'm going to pay you money or gold to perform this task. Because what's to stop a sneaky group saying, okay, can we be paid up front? I'll take the money, we won't do the adventure and we'll go and do something else. Now I can think of a few groups who would do that. I have had players at my table who've done that and have certainly tried. So make sure that if payments is involved, any kind of money, not all of it is up front. And make sure if they don't do the task that there are consequences and that that particular individual will chase them down and make their life miserable. Otherwise it's going to be problematic. So here's an example, a movie example for those of you who might be interested. It was not a particularly popular movie. It's called the League of Extraordinary Gentlemen. And essentially this is a collection of individuals who are famous. They are brought together by a character by the name of M, who turns out to be the villain, Moriarty as it happens. Now for those of you who don't know, there's lots of spoilers coming through here, okay? These characters come together, they have special abilities, and they are trying to stop a villain. And the funny thing is, the villain they're trying to stop just happens to be the villain who's hired them. So that's quite confusing, I know, but patrons work well. As long as you understand that if you just make everything about money, then the players don't have any investment unless they get paid. And I often feel like it's better to make sure you tie it into something that does not involve just monetary payment. Okay, so that is the patron and getting hired. Let's deal with the next one. What about warriors or soldiers or some sort of elite guard for a kingdom under threat? And my favourite example of this is definitely got to be the Three Musketeers. Let's get real. It is one of the classics. It's one of the best stories around. We're talking about, sorry, I'll just get the lights in the right place. We're talking about some of the best characters that could come together for a particular purpose. And what are they trying to do? They are trying to save the Queen. It might not be the king. It might be the Queen's honour. It might be the king. It might be a nobleman. It might be the whole kingdom is under threat, and they need to band together and work as one. One for all and all for one. Work together. They're not really necessarily, I mean, they get paid, but they don't really get paid a lot. They're doing it because it's their patriotic duty to do so. So I think that is a great way to lead in. And I can't think of too many players who wouldn't like the idea of playing an adventure where they are considered a lot like the Three Musketeers. So a great lead in. Works really, really well. Just give me a second. I just need to close my window. It is starting to rain, and therefore I will have to push things closed, otherwise it's not going to work. I'm just moving my window closed. I will back in a sec. And there. Small intermission. Small intermission is just about over. Just making sure I am back in the right place so that I can actually continue this. Yes, we're on and we are back. Okay. Now, what I want to talk about next is what about survivors? One of the more interesting aspects of any kind of Dungeons and Dragons adventure is the opportunity to play characters who might have revenge. I mean, revenge is a strong catalyst for adventure and conflict, right? So why not survivors? And I was trying to think of a story or adventure that might sort of revolve around that, and I thought of the pre-made adventure Storm King's Thunder, which I've played not so long ago. I think that's a good example of where you are part of a village that is attacked by giants, and you have to go and then solve the problem of why the giants are causing so much trouble. Really, really interesting idea, and there's a lot of motivation behind it, provided that you get player buy-in. I still think it worked really well. I liked the idea myself. It was a clean way to actually start your campaign. Destroy the township that the player's characters live in, and they are the sole survivors, and work your way from there. And what is a good example in terms of a movie? I was trying to think of something that sort of would make a lot of sense, and I thought the only thing I could think of was Conan. Conan is a good example of his village was destroyed. He is the sole survivor. I know it's a single character, but you could do this with a collection of individuals, and over time he builds up his body and his training, and he goes on pretty much a bit of a rampage to destroy Doom, a snake cult. Get rid of them, dispose of them, because they are spreading across the world like a dark virus of some kind. So this is a really good example of, and I suggest watching this movie because it's got so much good stuff when it comes to Dungeons and Dragons in it. All sorts of interesting stuff, particularly if you like snakes. Conan, lone survivor of a village who goes on a quest and eventually becomes a king, and maybe your players' characters will eventually become kings, but a good way to lead in. Okay, I'm going to just flick the page over. I'm going to continue on. Oh, there we go. I wanted to just mention again quickly that you need to use #question, #advice if you want me to respond to you in chat, okay? Right, so we're getting there. Well, it's going to be a long video, guys. Okay, so next idea. What about a call to action from a dream? So they have a dream of some kind, and there's a call to action to go on a quest, perform a mission, perform a task. This is only really going to work if you have all of your characters having the same dream. I think that's where the secret lies. So what is a good example of where this works? As it happens, one of my favourite movies, The Matrix. The Matrix is a good example of all of the characters on the submarine they've all been in the dream world, a machine world, and they have to break out of that dream and fight the machine threat. And Neo is obviously the key individual behind the group, but there's still a group on the submarine, and Neo is just the leader. Certainly got a key part to play, but this is what I was thinking of in terms of there is a dream, and you use that as your lead-in to create your own quest. And it could be anything at all. You could start them off as they are stuck in the dream world, and maybe they need to do a few things in the dream world to escape the dream world to get themselves back into the real world. Or maybe they simply have a dream while they're sleeping, which leads them on their quest. Make sure when you do any of these sorts of ideas or present any of these ideas that you get player buy-in, that players like the ideas of the campaign starter you're using. Otherwise, it's absolutely useless to you, right? Okay, so that is the call to action from a dream sequence of some kind, or a fantasy world that's sort of all made up of dream. what about the players' characters are part of an organization or a guild or the same company or even the same clan? Now, this has been used many times before. The factions in Dungeons and Dragons 5e are a good example of being able to tie your characters together with the same goal and mission in mind. And so this is why using factions is a really good idea. What I'm going to suggest to you is, when it comes to stories to pull from, there are so many. There are so many good ideas out there. Probably one of the strongest stories that you will know of is Star Wars. All part of the rebellion against the evil empire. Now, this is science fiction, I realise, but look, the difference between science fiction and fantasy is just the dressing. You can change everything, okay? Luke Skywalker, Han Solo, Princess Leia, Obi-Wan Kenobi, C-3PO, Chewbacca, okay, and R2-D2. They make up the party, they make up the group that go on this adventure. And they are fighting the rebellion, trying to get the plans for some great invasion or great war machine to the rebellion before they are destroyed. You can use all these ideas in your Dungeons and Dragons adventure. So Star Wars, great place to look. Another one, if you want to go more sort of a little bit covert, more secret agent-like rather than rebellion, and that is Mission Impossible. Almost all of the Mission Impossible movies revolve around a covert operation or group who work together, much like a Dungeons and Dragons group, to stop a huge threat taking place. Whether it be the activation of a nuclear bomb, the release of a horrible plague or virus, the use of some sort of technology, maybe the infiltration of higher up government. All of these things are things that you can use, and of course you can go Ghost Protocol on them if you like. But Mission Impossible, secret agents, players love the idea of being secret agents, so I would certainly use that as a possibility as well. The other one that I wanted to talk about, and that is The Hobbit. Now, I know a lot of people are like, oh, no, you're not going to talk about The Hobbit. Whether it be the book or the movie, let's talk about the book. I'm going to hold up the movie, The Unexpected Journey. Look, it's not the movie you need to worry about. The concept behind the story. Remember, this is about a group of dwarves who have a wizard who's hardly ever there and a hobbit with them. But it's really about the story of a group of dwarves who are from the same clan trying to reclaim their home. This is actually a really good campaign starter, which is why Tolkien did so well with the story. It works so well. It can be used by you. Cannibalize and pinch, steal, borrow everything you can think of from other forms of literature and fantasy. And science fiction is good too, but fantasy is good too. I think those are all really good strong lead-ins, because remember, all of the players' characters have some sort of link. They're all part of the same collection and group working together. And the only time it's going to fall apart is when you start to allow players to be a poisoned pill, or some sort of spanner in the works, or a double agent. Then you're going to run into problems. I would be very careful unless you're dealing with an experienced group who don't mind that sort of repercussion. I'm always a little bit reluctant to allow players to do that at my table, where they want to be part of an organisation that has a huge amount of trust built around them, and what they do is do something to undermine it in the background, which will flow on and they'll find out about later on. It's not really a good way to run an adventure unless you're dealing with people who are really good friends and who are mature enough to be able to deal with the spanner in the works when you're dealing with a group which are supposed to be so tightly connected. Okay, so just bear that in mind when you're trying to use that particular idea. I just need a drink of water. I'm on to my second glass. It's a good sign. Okay, as I said, hashtag question, hashtag advice if you want me to respond. Okay, so next one is, what about the characters are shipwrecked on an island or on another world or another plane of existence, or maybe they are trapped in a particular location. A good example of this is the TV series Lost. Or what about something a bit more modern, maybe a bit more futuristic and science fiction-y, and that is Lost in Space. A really good example of, this is a family who, for whatever reason, work together, but they get lost on another planet and they have to survive. That's what the story is really all about. And whether you use time jumps, or they have to repair the ship, or they have to build a new ship, or they have to find another way off, these are all things that set up for quite a long campaign if you want to, or quite a short campaign. But it certainly puts everybody in the same place. It also can restrict, particularly if you use an island of some kind rather than a world. It means that they can't go too far. They can't leave the group. They can't sort of go off on their own and do stuff that would draw them away, which is why by isolating them in one location like this, shipwrecking is always a good way to work it. Now they have to work together to resolve their issues, which is find food, water, shelter, and find a way off the island. And survive the threats and the beasts and the monsters and creatures that reside and live in this location. Or maybe there is a major villain they need to contend with. All really, really interesting ways of tying in your players' characters. Okay, what about, let's get really funky now. For those of you who heard me say the first one, I think it's number 12 in my idea list. This is, what about the PCs are recently raised dead? So they have died, that for whatever reason they have died, and they have been raised from the dead, from a cemetery or from a battlefield with some sort of magic, with a call to action. Now, this is a little bit out of the ordinary, because what happens when you start using characters who have already died and they come back to life? Well, as it happens, there are plenty of things you can do with that, and I have a couple of ideas for you, which I'm going to throw out there. It breaks all of the boundaries in terms of death, right? Because death is supposedly supposed to be the worst thing that can happen to your character, but you've already gone through that process. So when you come back, you know, are you coming back as a ghost, as a zombie? Are you coming back as a construct of some kind? Are the characters coming back as a werewolf, or maybe a vampire? Maybe a vampire is... Maybe you've got a group full of vampires that are going to go on an adventure of some kind. Maybe it is to destroy the vampire that made them a vampire so they can get rid of their vampire nature. Maybe that's part of the story you're going to build for them. So I'm going to go with the one that I found in my library of movies, and that is Underworld. Underworld is a good example. There are two main characters who have to contend with the fact that they have been made vampires, and not necessarily because they wanted to. We find out more about this as we go. But this is a good example. I don't really want to talk about Twilight. For anybody who starts saying, what about Twilight? Twilight's got vampires and werewolves in them. I don't like my vampires that sparkle in sunlight. So we're leaving that alone. What about RoboCop? RoboCop died, put back together. The $6 million man I talked about in another video not so long ago, where he's suffered a huge injury and they rebuilt him. Maybe they have to rebuild the characters. Ghost in the Shell is a good example. Okay, this is one character gets rebuilt, but many of the characters that she hangs out with have been rebuilt because they suffered huge and horrible injuries. So another way of working it is starting off with them dying or suffering a huge fatal injury where things have to progress from that. Now, make sure when you explain that kind of idea to anybody that you are making it clear that something horrific is going to happen to their character. So their character's probably suffered some sort of horrible trauma. Psychological issues occur when you start dying or suffering major injuries. And maybe they need to build those sorts of ideas and concepts into their character. So I would suggest start it out. It's a little bit different. You could even have your characters having their adventure in the realm of the dead. Rather than on the material plane, their adventure takes place in the hell, or the abyss, or in the ethereal plane. All of those ideas could work quite nicely. Just as I said, you've got to make sure you let people know what they're in for. Okay, next one. What about, let's go with something a bit more punchy. Let's go right into the action. Let's go straight into it. As I said before, hashtag advice, hashtag question if you want me to respond to the live chat. What about they are fighting side by side in a gigantic battle or war, and they have to survive? This is the key. This is how you start it. You start it with a bang. You start it with roll initiative. You're in this massive battle and you're fighting side by side. You've known each other for some time, so obviously the characters need to know each other well because they are fighting as a unit now. And maybe it's a desperate battle. Maybe it's a battle they cannot win. Some good examples of that are, I would say, Battlestar Galactica. Battlestar Galactica is a good example. It's a combination of two. It's like the wagon train, but it starts off with a massive battle that takes place, and it's about survival after the battle. Maybe it's a continuing war. Maybe there's going to be more going on. Maybe it isn't. We have a giant battle, and then now you have to run, and you're on the run and trying to escape those people who have beaten you in a war. Maybe it is that you are part of a battle that will continue on for quite some time. So Battle Los Angeles. I couldn't think of anything else, but Battle Los Angeles sort of illustrates the point of you start off with a big, huge fight. Really, all of the stuff leading up in the story is backstory. What is important is them being dropped in the middle of the thick of battle and having to deal with something they have never had to deal with before. Use monsters, use creatures, use constructs. It doesn't matter. They do not need to be aliens. You can use aliens, obviously, but that's a good way to start an adventure where all of the characters know each other. They're all under pressure and stress. They have to work together to make it work. Otherwise, they're probably going to get wiped out. So, as I said, hashtag question, hashtag advice if you want me to respond to the live chat. Okay? Alright, so let's go on to the next one. This has showed up quite a few times, and it's quite popular too. This story has been retold so many times, and that is some has-been warriors or soldiers or fighters or gunslingers or whatever you might call it. They have sort of past their best, and they answer a plea from a village who is being raided by bandits or monsters or creatures or something like that. And they do this because, not so much for money, but because they've lost their way in the world. And maybe this is your start lead-in. Maybe you're dealing with characters who have been around a while, and some of them may be at the end of their life, maybe they're at the end of their career, or feel like they're at the end of their career, and they band together to do something that they know has probably got impossible odds. Now, the best example of having your characters answer a call or plea from villagers who need assistance is the Seven Samurai story. The Seven Samurai is a fantastic movie. I recommend checking it out. It has been remade many, many times. I think Battle Beyond the Stars was a science fiction version of it. There's the Magnificent Seven, which most of you will probably be familiar with, which is a cowboy western one, where you get a bunch of gunslingers who band together to help a village fight off bandits that are raiding and causing them trouble. So this is a good way to lead in. Now, how does it work if those characters don't necessarily know each other? Well, you'll notice with something like the Magnificent Seven, many of the characters actually already know each other. They're not all sort of lone wolves. They're not all lone killers or lone warriors or lone soldiers. Some of them actually do know each other. Some of them don't, but some of them do. And that's the important thing to make sure you build some links in. You can't have everybody be a lone wolf. If a dungeon master does that, you're going to cause a lot of trouble. Don't do that to yourself. Okay, so avoid anything like that whatsoever. I still think one of my favourite movies is The Magnificent Seven, and the Seven Samurai story is awesome, and you could use this so well in a Dungeons and Dragons adventure and just give it that fantasy flavour. Okay. Alright, next one on my list is very common, and that is Lost Mine of Phandelver uses this as it happens. This is a escort for a wagon. So escorting guards for a wagon, train, or a caravan, or supplies of some kind, moving people or goods from one place to another. And that is your adventure hook. It's not a great adventure hook because I feel like the transaction of money rather than favors and friendship aren't as strong, but you can use it. I think one of the more interesting ones that I've seen done recently that I thought worked really well, because each of the characters have different reasons for doing it, but they are all forced into a situation where it has to work. If they don't work together, they will all perish, and they know it. And that has got to be Mad Max. Mad Max Fury Road. Furiosa and Mad Max get together, and it's basically just a great huge long road movie where they ride this truck from one place to another, trying to get away from an overlord and get to the green place. And you can do the same thing with your adventure. Mad Max's reason is survival, to escape. And he will cooperate with Furiosa because Furiosa has a group of individuals around her who have the same focus. The brides that are trying to escape, they all have the same reason and rationale for why they are doing this. So you don't have to make your campaign starter or get your players to have exactly the same connection. There can be some variation amongst that as long as people agree to work together on it, which is why the session 0 is so important. So the wagon train. The Lost Mine of Phandelver uses the same sort of concept, where you're working for a friend. You're getting paid, but you are essentially working for a friend to move wagon supplies or mining equipment from one place to another. Okay? I need another drink of water. Here's my next one. This is one of my favourites because it's so modern in its concept, but it's been pulled from old literature and old theatre, old TV series, stuff like that. As I said, hashtag question, hashtag advice if you want me to respond in the live chat. Okay, let's go with find an ancient artifact before an evil group of whatever cult or group or force or nation can get hold of it and dominate the world, dominate the planet, dominate the world, dominate the land, whatever. Okay, now it might be that they have to stop them getting this artifact, and you've got to find it before they can, or maybe it's to find an artifact to use it to defeat the villain or the great threat of some kind. All of these are certainly options. Examples. One of the things I find interesting is I always find myself coming back to Indiana Jones. Indiana Jones and Raiders of the Lost Ark. We know about it. We've all probably watched it. It's a great movie. It's a great story. Indiana Jones teams up with other individuals. There's really, I would say there are 3 key characters who work together in this. Okay, so it's a small group, but it's still a group that works together to achieve an outcome. And they're trying to stop the Nazis from getting hold of the Lost Ark, which has basically the 10 Commandments, the stone tablets in it, and it's supposed to have incredible powers gifted by God. So you can do very much the same thing. It might not be It might not be a box of some kind. It might be something smaller. It could be a ring. It could be a piece of jewelry. It could be all sorts of things. So whatever it is, it might be a statue. You can pick anything as your ancient artifact. It might be a piece of armor. Remember, when we say an ancient artifact, it doesn't mean that it needs to be a weapon. It doesn't have to be armor. It doesn't have to be weapons. It doesn't have to be a tool. It can just be a piece of art that is important, that will give the players the opportunity to stop the villains or defeat them. Another one I think that comes up, and I know a few people have probably watched this movie, and that is Krull. Krull. So they've got to get hold of basically a flying star. It's the weapon that's needed to defeat the beast who is invading their world. And that's what's important. But while this is taking place, there is a group of individuals who, for whatever reason, team up, and they are trying to fight for the world, make sure their families are safe, things like that. All of these tie everybody together. Another good campaign starter. Okay, find an ancient artifact. Really, on the same heel of that one, and that is, what about reforging a broken weapon or magic item, and this is to slay an invincible or terrible beast or creature or monster or villain of some kind. Or maybe it is to destroy, not reforge, but destroy a magic item so that that will defeat the main villain, the Dark Lord. So we're talking about stories that we know of, quite familiar with the Dark Crystal, where the crystal is what kept the peace. It's been shattered, it's been broken, there's a shard missing. Replace the shard, defeat the Skinxies. I think that's how you pronounce it. Okay, that's what the focus of this is. And there are, let's get real, there are probably about 3 or 4 main characters who work together to make this happen. That's what the story is all about. I mean, and you could say there's 2, but actually I would say that the little fluffy creature is counted as number 3 as well. Okay, that's where I'm going with this. Now that is to defeat an ancient evil, putting back the Dark Crystal. Or, we all know it, Lord of the Rings. Stop the Dark Lord. The only way to stop the Dark Lord is to get the One Ring and throw it into Mount Doom and melt it down and destroy it utterly forever. So, Lord of the Rings, yet another good example where they are given this artifact, the lead-in for the whole adventure, which they have to protect from evil forces and get it from one place to the next, or find somebody who can unforge this magic item or this artifact or whatever it is. Okay, so I need another drink of water. I'm doing a lot of talking. I know this is long, guys. Okay, so next one on my list. I've worked through that. Yes, let's talk about CSI. I'm not a fan of CSI on TV, but a private investigation group or team who solves mysteries and cases, maybe strange events, all those sorts of things. Sapphire and Steel is something that comes to mind. It's an old TV series, but also too, I was trying to find something that would sort of work best. I think that the CSI concept works really well because you're probably familiar with those TV series. Scooby-Doo, Mysteries Inc. This is a group of individuals who get together, solve mysteries, solve strange events, and they have to work together. And sometimes they're stopping supernatural events, sometimes it's a not so supernatural event. Really up to you, okay? I'm not saying you run your campaign like a Scooby-Doo group. It's not like you put a bunch of bumbling idiots together and they have to find their way. But essentially it's the same sort of concept. They could be private investigators or a private investigator group. It's all tied together. And for those people who really like solving puzzles and mysteries and need surprises, This is the sort of campaign that will appeal to those sorts of players and people. So if that's the sort of people you've got at your table, run them that sort of campaign starter. Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson, Sherlock Holmes and Dr. Watson. There's a team. It's a team of two. Do we include the butler or the maid, the housekeeper? I don't know. It's up to you. So all of those can make really good campaign starters, depending on the flavour that you want to use and the type of players at your table. Now, I have two more things I want to talk about, and the last one is probably a little bit off cuff, so we'll see how we go with that. So my last one, second to last one, sorry, is what about a crew of pirate ship? A crew on a pirate ship. Who doesn't want to be a pirate? I know I would love to be in a pirate campaign. I'm looking forward to the new adventure that's coming that's supposed to be around that. You can make your own. So maybe you're plundering the seas, or sinking rich sailing vessels and taking their stuff, or maybe you are knocking off ships that have slaves aboard them, so you can rescue those individuals and free them. And you'll use them, of course, on your own ship to help support the crew. Or they make up a community that you build up over time. So it's not just, when you think pirates, I think pirates, Robin Hood. I think you're playing an outlaw, so make sure it's clear to them that you're playing an outlaw of some kind. But their motivation doesn't always have to be because I want money. Maybe it is to do something for the greater good. And I think that's a really fun campaign starter. Just stick them on a pirate ship. You're part of a pirate ship. Pirates of the Caribbean, there's a whole bunch of movies revolving around that. Captain Blood, which I've shown you already, another really good example. Maybe they come across a treasure map and they get hooked up with pirates, and now we're talking about Treasure Island. The treasure map is a common lead-in to any kind of adventure, right? So many stories use it. You can use that. It's been played out so many times. So if you've got a group of people who are really experienced playing the game, you might find that giving them a treasure map is just a bit too cliche. The trope is used, they're ready for something new. But as I said, it depends on your group. And this is all really supposed to be about giving you ideas, okay? My last pitch to you for today is a real campaign starter that I used. For those of you who are unsure what I'm talking about, I have used this. I called my campaign the Umbra Circus. And it was based off a small adventure called Murder's Mark for Pathfinder. And the players, they were essentially hired to solve a mystery, solve a murder in a circus. That was just a prelude to what was going to follow. They solved the mystery and they joined the circus as animal wranglers. And their goal is not to kill monsters and take their treasure, it's to capture beasts and creatures that can go into the zoo or into the circus and be put on show. So now they have to figure out how to move eggs and creatures in cages, transporting them from one location to the next. I used the Isle of Dread or Island of Dread. It's a very old adventure. It was a lot of fun. It has probably been the most interesting way I have led my characters into a campaign. They were so happy with the idea, and it was not really my idea. They were like, after they had run that first adventure, they said, Fred, we want to be part of the circus. We want to be animal wranglers. And we had a discussion about how this would work. Running away from somewhere else to join the circus has always been the desire of a lot of people around the world, right? But you can also go the other way. Maybe they are circus performers who are running away from the circus to try and find a better life because they find the circus life is too much for them. I couldn't really find anything that sort of would tell that story to sort of demonstrate. But I have been recently watching a couple of movies that did have circuses in them, and I think the one that I've watched recently is the Greatest Showman. Now this is less about killing beasts and capturing beasts or anything like that, but think about something like Jurassic Park, where the goal in Jurassic Park, I think it's Jurassic Park 2, is to capture beasts and creatures, transport them to, I think it's New York, and then set up a zoo-like location, which is already there. Really bad idea. I used the same concept in my adventure, but it's a good lead-in, and it's off the norm to what people are used to playing. So if you want something really, really different, using the circus idea can be a bit more fresh and a bit newer to people who have played the game for many, many years and are used to just about everything under the sun. Okay, so that is, oh, hang on, we've got a hashtag there. Somebody's thrown in a hashtag. Brent, hashtag Fred, how do you have the characters use a pirate ship, for example, the cannons, sailing, movement of the ship? Do you have a suggestion where to look? Okay. I do. I believe that you'll find cannons and how they work in the Dungeon Master's Guide. It's in there. Laser guns, pistols, but I'm pretty sure there's a cannon in there as well. If you can't find it in there, then use the ballista. You can probably get the stats and how that works off the internet. It's probably freely available. I know many of the adventures, pre-made adventures, have used the ballista. The ballista is not exactly a cannon, but why not? How you work around sailing a ship and so forth, I would just go with narrative. Go narrative rather than get too technical. The idea, remember, you're playing Dungeons and Dragons. The idea is to make the adventure and story fun and exciting, and if you build too many mechanics around it, it's going to just get bogged down. So I would go with narrative. If you want to use cannons, and so you're destroying other ships and so forth, absolutely, you should find that in the Dungeon Master's Guide. And if you can't find it there, I am pretty sure you will find it in a number of adventures. I believe there is some information in Storm King's Thunder. Where else is there? There might also be some in Hoard of the Dragon Queen, because I'm pretty sure there are ballistas on top of the towers for the Skyreach Castle. So you can get that information from there if you need to. Blood and Plunder. Blood and Plunder. Yeah. Nice. Okay, so that is pretty much everything I have for today. I have covered as much as I possibly can. Spelljammer, somebody's just talked about Spelljammer having a lot of information. That's the second version of the game, for those of you who are wondering. I'm gonna cut it short here. I'm going to say this is enough. I've been talking for ages, my voice is about to go, and I'm ready to sort of go and have some food. So look, if you found this useful, educational, helpful in some way, please share it and like the video. If you like this sort of thing, I usually don't do some sort of Dungeon Master guide each week, and so subscribe, hit the bell button to be notified when I go live and when I publish new videos. If you want to support my channel, you supported me by watching this very long video. I suggest you break it up into chunks and watch it in pieces, okay? I don't do Patreon, but I do have hundreds of videos that you can go and check out if you feel like looking at other content that I've made. There is many videos on Dungeon Master Q&As, how to run Lost Mine of Phandelver, how to run the Death House, how to run Curse of Strahd. I think there's a little bit of stuff around that, adventure hooks and so forth, if that's the sort of thing you're really interested in. As I said, I don't plan to do Patreon, but I do have affiliate links down in the description where you can find stuff online and buy it, and I get a small commission for anything you buy from Amazon and the book depository when you go through those links, and that really helps support the channel as well. And this is your opportunity to ask questions, give feedback. I will probably go through the live chat box very quickly. and try to respond to anything that I think might be useful before I disappear. And otherwise, if you're not part of the live chat, that's what the comment section is all about. And if you missed the live chat, I'm sorry. Just have to use the comment section, okay? And hey, till next time, keep rolling those 20s. Keep playing Dungeons and Dragons. Play more Dungeons and Dragons. Okay, I'm done. Okay, I'm not gone. I do need to drink some water. I will go through the live chat very quickly. This is a really long video. I knew it would be, and I knew that talking about so much stuff would be problematic. For those of you who are wondering, will I ever make videos on just specific ideas? Really, that's going to come down to you in the live chat and the comment section who give me feedback on this video as to whether I make sort of a video on running a campaign starter in a tavern or in a prison or as slaves or as circus performers or stuff like that. If I see enough people give me feedback and information and useful ideas, I might consider doing separate videos on those topics, okay, for those of you who are interested. Now, if you're still in the room and still hanging around, I'm going to just jump back to my camera, and you will see that my face is turned to the side because I am reading through, trying to get everything responded to as quickly as possible. Okay, the Carter videos. How's it going, Carter videos? Thank you for your feedback, by the way. Hi, Darren. How's it going? Brandon. Hi. FL Space Bear. Thank you, your brother, for the content. You're welcome for the content, Space Bear. No problems. I'm a DM, and the more content, the better. Well, I'm trying to do as much as I can. Hi, Joe. How's it going? Sup, guys? Driving home. Yeah. Okay. All right. He's listening to that. They're saying hi. They're saying hi. Space Bear is loving it. Good. Fred's input. Brandon, what do you got here? I agree. A story without a foundation is doomed to failure. Yes, it absolutely is. Alright, so that's about a third of the way through the chat. Jen Paul is here. That's my Dungeon Master currently. Our current campaign is a good example of a cohesive group of adventurers where they work well together because of a common bond. Yes, we're all Knights of the Unicorn following their deity. And it's worked really well. I know a lot of people might think that this is a bit odd, but we all selected a common background, that we are all Knights of the Unicorn, and it's been fabulous. We have a code of conduct for the group, things that we would normally do, which is quite outside the norm. So we're a bunch of drunken, noble people who just like going on adventures, doing dangerous things. The money is really less important. It's really getting stonkered and doing the wish, good things. It's really like, I guess, think about it in terms of an individual who has no care in the world and no concern for whether they die or live. They just want to have a good time. It's like party time in the world. It's been really good. Desperados, Jen just talked about Desperados. That's referring to the Tavern. We already talked about that. I've already responded to Brandon regarding his question about, or advice. Heroes Headquarters question, we already covered that question. Will hashtag me, that got my attention. We've already covered that. And Darren, he's responding to Carter videos. No, we'll keep going. Just for those of you who are wondering what's going on, I'm just trying to make sure I haven't missed anything, because I know a lot of people won't necessarily have been hashtagging. Captain Blood is one of my favourite movies. I think it's fabulous. And I think as a campaign starter, being slaves that break free, don't have them being slaves then having to try to break free. Have them being slaves that break free and now have their own pirate ships. Like, awesome. Joe, What do you got here? You can just make more things to investigate in Phandelver if your party is attached to that little city. Well, yeah, I suppose you could. I feel like most PM players are going to want to go further beyond Phandalin. Phandalin is sort of, you're going to outgrow that. That's the thing. Well, so Drow matron trying to resurrect Loth. A Drow, okay, alright, struggling to come up with a mid-game storyline to link Lost Mine of Phandelver to my homebrew story. Look, Will, with something like the Underdark, you're dealing with Drow, you're dealing with the Underdark. The Wave Echo Cave can lead into the Underdark, and maybe they find their way into a passageway that leads them further and deeper down. And of course, like most explorers and adventurers, they tend to go following their nose. That could be enough. Maybe it's going to be easy enough to lead into that by having some of the Drow come through that passageway into Wave Echo Cave once they've completely wiped out the undead and secured that part of the story. So it shouldn't be that hard to follow up with. And I have done, as I said, a video on how to link Lost Mine of Phandelver to other stories and continue the campaign. Joe's giving some good advice on how to do that. I think that's great. Let's keep going down here. See, this is the good thing about this community. Even though if you don't get the advice from me, somebody else is going to give you really good advice. I'm going to have trouble with your name. Carquay Polich. I'm doing Lost Mine of Phandelver and your videos are helping me a lot. You're linking to Tyranny of Dragons and Storm King's Thunder. What are your tips for super campaign? I advise look, this video is about campaign starters. Do not try to over prep and plan your campaign. Do not have everything planned out from start, level 1 through to level 20. You do not know if it's going to pan out. Forget about it. Super campaigns very rarely come off. They hardly ever make it. So few groups ever get to level 20. So few groups are interested enough in the story to play that long. So just play it out for as long as that particular part of the story is going to work. Don't get too carried away. So super campaigns, I personally feel, are a bad idea. Okay? That's just my advice. That's just my opinion. Okay? Dibs on the glaive. Yeah, somebody wants the glaive. Okay. Pirates of the Dark Water. Pirates of the Dark Water. Yes, and why not? Let's go with Pirates of the Dark Water. Here we go. I've already commented, I think, on the pirate ship stuff and suggestions for how to find stuff on sailing and movement of ship. I think, like I said, just narrative is best to go with that. Blood and Plunder has been rules. D&D coming out. New book. Yes, there's a new book coming out for running a pirate and sea campaign. Whether it be underwater or above the water, I think it's going to take place in different locations. So check that out. Blood and Plunder, cool. Googling it now. Spelljammer, 2nd edition, supplement, had ship combat rules, in a space. So this is like, Spelljammer is like the Astral Sea, rather than, so you're really throwing your players into the deep end if you start your campaign in the Astral Sea, because there's going to be some fairly heavy threats in that location. But good advice, William. Narrative for sure. Yes, I feel like narrative works best. Everybody said, it's a whole bunch of people saying hi. Thank you, Darren, Brent, Lee Gladiator. Hello, we started recently to play and was wondering if you can give tips to help me to get friends getting to actually roleplay. Look, a bunch of people were asking me, how can I do a video on how to get people to roleplay? Just model roleplaying. You can't make people roleplay the way you want them to roleplay. You can't make your group of people, your players, play the game like the Critical Role team. Okay? I think this is where a lot of it comes from. You know, they want to see that really in-depth, you know, using a voice, really getting into their character, knowing all the nuances of their character. You know, people just show up to play Dungeons and Dragons for a few hours just to get away from the real world. They don't often want to get that involved. The Critical Role team are very different. That's not your normal play group. So my suggestion to you is stop trying to be like Acquisitions Incorporated or Critical Role and just let them play the game however they feel comfortable. If you want them to get involved, just model role playing. If they like what they see you doing, they will probably try to copy. And if they like that idea, they will copy it from Critical Role. But I just don't feel like I feel like it's a trap to try to give you advice on how to get your players to role play more. Because rolling dice is still role playing. Okay, it's a different type of role playing, and not everybody is comfortable in trying to play characters like Matthew Mercer, Marisha Ray, Travis, Laura Bailey, all of that. Okay, Sam Regal. Just forget about that. Just let them be and just play the game. Yeah, I know people want me to do a video on how to get players to role play more, but look, just let them play the game the way they want to play the game. Okay, so I am done. I'm done with this. I'm going to head off. Okay, I'm going to leave you guys be. I've provided you with a heap of advice regarding campaign starters. We're going to leave it there. What is likely to happen tomorrow? I'm going to put together the Xanathar Beholder miniature. And I'm probably going to put up a poll for the players. Not Dungeon Masters, but players. Next week there will not be a Dungeon Masters guide because I'm going to do a video for the players. A Q&A for them. And I will put up a topic and hopefully they will come up with something they want to see produced. And we'll see how we go. And it can't be anywhere near as long as this because this is just so hard. Okay. Alright, so let's leave it at that. I'm going to take off. You guys have a good night, good day. I recommend going and checking out some of the other channels that I have featured on my channel, such as Drell Bard, Roll for Damage, Blanco, who else have I got there? AJ Pickett. There's a whole bunch, and they can provide you with a lot of really interesting content. And I'm talking about channels that aren't that big, rather than the big channels. You're all probably watching them anyway, so I'm pushing you in their direction. Wally DM has some good videos as well. Okay, that's it. I'm done. You guys have a good night, good day, good evening, whatever it is. Look after yourself, look after your family, and see you later.